Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
These shows are brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation with a mission of helping people find hope after loss, and by the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, we've got a great show today, and it's going to be really some interesting guests.
Yeah, Mom, we're going to talk about hope after an anticipated death. And we have 3 guests with us today. And the first one is someone we've had on before, Dr. Gary Jaworski. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Gary is the president of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. And he has been on our show a few times and been on our podcast. He is doing really incredible work with people that have had deaths due to brain tumors, children. And I am very fortunate to serve on his advisory board. And one of the things I love that you're doing, Gary, is that you are expanding the sibling loss program. So
we're delighted. Thank you for inviting me back.
Yes.
You know, our bereavement program really has 2 goals primarily. One is to build community among people in the bereaved world who have had a loss due to a brain tumor or spinal cord tumor. The thing that makes me angry the most is isolation. When people feel isolated because of the loss, that we can't I can't countenance that. So we really want to build community. The second is to have people like Annette, who is here, who are peer mentors to help the bereaved community get through their own losses, help them be a buddy, a friend, a confidant, and that is most important. But what is exciting for us is that we're expanding all of this to the sibling community.
I love that.
Every time we go, wherever we go, where it could be in Boston, in Minneapolis, and in Houston, everyone says that this part of the community is not recognized enough. You, I know, do a lot.
And there's not enough services for bereaved siblings. So I love that you're doing that. And like you said, Annette next to you, Annette Bozak, is very involved with the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. And I'm so glad that you brought her to my awareness, because I know that she facilitates support groups on Facebook, and you're a peer mentor to bereaved parents. And I know that you do this in honor of your daughter Stephanie, who died at 20 years old of a brain tumor.
Yes.
And I know that it went fairly fast, because from what I saw, it was 6 months from start to the time that she died. And I know she was a student at Rutgers.
Yes, she was.
And was living a very full life at that point.
Yes, it was very, very quick, and thankfully for her, but it was very traumatic, obviously.
So what great information you've gotten. What a great support. What a wonderful thing to have. And your son, talk about support, Christopher is here.
Yes, and I love having a sibling, because I was saying before the show, it's not easy to get the siblings, and I'm a bereaved sibling also. It's not easy to get the siblings to speak. And Christopher was saying to me, Heidi, why do you think that is? And I think part of it is that we are so used to being strong for our parents and taking care of our parents that I think sometimes we're kind of in the background a little bit with our own loss.
And you also talk about, you know, with siblings, living the life kind of for your brother, and, you know, having it that full life. So maybe moving forward and showing people that you can move forward is one of the things. I'm going to have you get back to these guys in a minute, but let's take a look at the clip about the Brain Tumor Foundation.
Okay, are we going to do that before I talk about Christopher?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to have to wait for that.
Fine, let's do it.
She's got some hot topic stuff to mention to Christopher, but we're going to make everybody wait until after the clip.
Very good.
Children's Brain Tumor Foundation is the nation's leader in quality of life programs for families with children affected by brain and spinal cord tumors. Connecting survivors, parents, and families through creative evidence-based programs, we build community while providing compassion and companionship. Please join us as we celebrate our 30th anniversary and build a stronger organization for the future. The Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, community and companionship on your journey.
Wow, what a great program you've got, Gary.
Thank you. We're very proud of it. It's been 30 years, as the video says.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
You know, I think that it's wonderful that you cover the whole thing, because a lot of the people that you work with have living children, and they're hoping, and they're hoping dreams, and, you know, you're always hoping for a cure, and I don't know, what, Annette, what your thing has been, but you always hope that your child's going to survive until they don't.
Of course.
Yeah, you do, until the last breath.
Yeah, until that last breath, and I love that you are with the living people and creating fun programs and doing that, but yet you moved on to the grief piece because there's so many people that drop it. Even hospices are supposed to follow people for a year, and they just give them a telephone call. But you're really making an effort to step out.
And they also have Facebook pages where people can go and get support, as I said, and that facilitates that. And I know that Jessica, your social worker, is involved with some of these Facebook pages that are online, right, Gary?
You can go right to the website, www.cbtf.org, and the page will be right there.
I love that, because sometimes when we're really, really in the midst of grief, we don't want to go outside.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And it might be 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my worst grief after Scott died was in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I used to go stand at the window and say, has anyone else out there ever lost a brother or sister? I feel like I'm the only one.
And the internet's amazing for that.
Yes.
Because, you know, you can be there with it and all that. Well, Heidi, we're going to talk to the family, and I'm going to let you introduce Christopher the way you wanted to before we did the clip.
Okay, so Christopher is the executive producer for Impractical Jokers. Now, why is that so important to me? Impractical Jokers is my son Alexander's favorite show in the whole world. He is 20 years old and he is currently deployed in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
He is Army infantry. And today I spoke with him and he wishes he could be here.
Me too.
And he watches your show on a daily basis.
On his
that's
iPhone,
fantastic.
right?
In Afghanistan. And he's in a very stressful situation right now. And that brings so much comic relief to him that it has been like invaluable. So I want to thank you for what you're doing, because I think humor is so important in any situation.
Yeah.
You know, stress and after
And
a
there
loss.
is a lot of grief and loss over in Afghanistan, for sure, and a lot of
Yes.
fear and the humor.
Yes. So
Wow.
when I found
God
out
bless.
that you were coming and I told him, he was like, what? I wish I wasn't in Afghanistan.
Well, thank him for his service for
I
me.
will.
And as I was telling you earlier, to hear people, to be able to help bring a little bit of levity to the world, it makes what we do worthwhile.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that it's getting all the way to that part of the world right now.
I can just see
Helping
him
out.
laying there on his bunk with his
Totally.
iPhone,
Yeah.
laughing. Is it?
Totally. And for everybody that's watching today, if you haven't watched Impractical Jokers, please do, because it will bring you immediate relief. Because it's very funny.
Right.
Yes,
You
it's
do a
humor
great job.
candy. Yeah.
Well, Annette, I want to get to you. Talk about some of the advice that you give these folks who have been involved with, who've lost kids to brain tumors. Talk about the early, because we've got some really early folks watching this show today.
Well, what I think about is each of the women that I've met, who are very, very special people, are so different in how they're dealing with their grief. So I have to be careful how I talk to them and what I say, because they are very different than I was and I am. But I still remember the first year as if it was yesterday. I remember I couldn't pick out clothes. I would go to the closet and I would just stare and I would just walk away because I couldn't put anything together in my mind. So I tried to get them to understand that after 24 years, I am functioning so much better, thanks to, I did a lot of reading.
I like that reading, educating yourself.
Educated
which
myself.
we find that's important.
Very important. And I have a favorite book, it's called A Broken Heart Still Beats.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a book that tells you self-help, it's about famous people all through the history who suffered loss. And you look and you say, oh, I never knew that, never realized that. And they may write poetry about it or write music about it. And then you see how grief was used to a good benefit.
I was curious, out of the book, what person had a loss that really comes to mind? Do you have one?
Well, I guess Eric Clapton, he wrote that
yeah.
beautiful song. you
Tears in
know,
Heaven.
Tears in Heaven.
Yep.
And it's just the idea that, I mean, all the other books, there's so many of all the same that tells you do this, don't do this, I felt, when Stephanie died, I felt that I wish a doctor had said to me, here, exercise, run. Instead, they wanted me to ask me, did I want sedation? And I said, no.
That is so good.
I said, I do not. And the doctor said, why? And I said, because I will take it the rest of my life.
Right. You said,
I
will it
need
bring my
this.
daughter back?
Yeah.
No.
So I wish that people would do more in that to help people and say, you know, it's good to exercise, it's good to eat healthy, and it's good to read, and all these, you know, common sense things that work for
You know,
me.
there's kind of some shame in it. I remember, I've talked about this before, but I was kind of a runner, not a great runner, but I would go out and run and exercise. And I remember a couple of weeks after my son was killed, I thought, I had this little voice in my head that said, you're going to get sick. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. And my voice kept saying I was. So I decided that I would go out for a run that I needed to. So I got my stuff on to go run. And I will tell you, that was one of the hardest things I'd ever done in my life, because I felt like my neighbors were looking out and saying, oh, look at her, she doesn't care.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, oh, look at her, she's over it, you know.
Yes.
That kind of thing. So there's the kind of guilt,
yes.
shame, you know. Giving yourself permission's tough, huh?
Yeah, you didn't cry enough, you didn't do this enough. And that's what's interesting about the women that I deal with, because I have one woman who goes to the cemetery every night, and that will be her life forever. And she will not have any joy because she thinks it's not a good thing for her to have joy. And so the spectrum of how people act and react is, to me, amazing. And of course, they're all fine. However they're doing it is
I love that you say
okay.
that. I mean, if she wants to go all the
every
time.
night.
And how people honor their people that die. Maybe they honor them through staying in that space.
Yes.
Or they honor them through living fully in a different
Yes.
place. It's
Yes.
interesting.
It is. It's, to me, very fascinating to see these women. And most of them are women. Very few men are involved at all. They're very quiet. Once in a while, some man will come on and write something, but most of the women, the people I deal with, are women.
Yeah. We see that definitely in Compassionate Friends and some of the other bereavement places we go. You see about 75% women.
Yes.
But we're hoping, we try to do as much with men as we can on our, you know,
Yes.
men's groups and things, so that they can go to the internet, because we're hoping maybe that's one of the places where guys,
Right.
you know, maybe
Well, and people,
congregate a little more.
when people see this show, if they see Gary and Christopher, it's like, oh, wait a minute,
Important.
there's guys on this show. I'm a guy. I'm going to watch this show.
Yes.
So, because maybe I'll identify more.
So you're going to want to get to the sibling piece with Christopher, right?
The sibling piece with Christopher. Okay, let's see. What do I want to ask Christopher? Yes, I'm just wondering, like, when Stephanie died, if you felt like you had to be strong for your mom. I mean, you're here today. Did you feel like the world acknowledged what had happened, or were they more focused on your parents?
No, I think there's credence to that. I have an older sister, so I was in between my older sister and my younger sister, obviously. You know, I think it was the dynamic. Yes, that was absolutely part of my dynamic, but it was also worrying about my older sister. That was one of the more interesting things that I sort of went through personally, was experiencing and learning. I think it was one of the hardest parts that I dealt with, or the hardest things that I learned was seeing how people, you know, everybody has their cares and concerns based upon the relationships that they have with everybody else in the family. So, you know, what my mother and father went through was completely different from where my brother-son brain was at and my brother-son emotions were at, and what I had to process and what I had to deal with. So yes, of course there was overlap. My mom was worried about me and I was worried about her.
And you were worried about your sister also.
I was always also worried about my older sister as well, sure.
Yeah.
And also worried about myself, trying to figure it out for my own head, my own life.
And did you feel like the world was concerned about you also, or did you feel like you kind of hid it?
The outside world?
Yes. Your friends.
I didn't
and-
hide it. No, I never felt like, I never felt like I had to hide it. I was open with it, and I shared it from day one. I think part of that was we had lost some other family members along the way before my sister, extended family. So it wasn't the first death, even though it was as close to home as it was. I knew some of what it meant to be strong and how to sort of take those initial steps, as difficult and hellish as they were. I knew that speaking about it, at least to me, it came naturally to be able to talk about it.
Were you home, or were you away at college, or where were you?
The day after I graduated, I went to school in the city, and the day after I graduated, I moved home to help take care of my sister up until she passed away.
Oh my goodness! Yes. Oh wow.
But it was interesting, and the world works in the way the world works. She had been away in school in New Jersey for a couple of years, while I had been just sort of starting out and out of, or just about to get out of college myself. So there was a moment of time where I sort of let her go to school and be at Rutgers, and I didn't get myself too involved in her life. So we were able to spend a very intense, unfortunate period of time together. But the 3 or 4 or 5 months that I spent with her before she passed away was invaluable.
That's amazing. That
Yeah.
says a lot for your family, that you all were together, that you would move home and be together as a family during that time.
Yeah.
Because some people would run the other way. They would be like, okay, this is too intense. I can't.
I'm going to California.
Yeah, I can't do this.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, you can see who raised me.
Yes, absolutely.
It was interesting because the day that Christopher was graduated from NYU, Stephanie had her first chemo at NYU. And he carried her in his cap and gown, I'll never forget that picture, to graduation.
Wow.
And he was incredible because, Ken had to go to work and he did his job and did whatever. And when she became to a point she couldn't walk, Christopher had to carry her, put her in a wheelchair, get her in the car, take her for, treatment, put her back in the car, bring her home.
And so she went to the graduation at NYU.
Yes, she did.
And you carried her and helped get her
Yeah. Wow.
situated.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's an incredible story. And one of the things that I'm kind of wondering when I hear this story is, wow, it must have been really tough when she did die, because you all were so working with her and having it right and setting it right and getting it right. And in a lot of ways you were able to accomplish tremendous things, and suddenly your purpose now it dies. And how was that? Because I know our audience, that's happened to a lot of them, is that they've invested all this.
And the other piece is, it's interesting, the whole idea of an anticipated loss, because you said something earlier, Annette, that idea of anticipation and is kind of not true, because you really do think at the very end that there's going to be a miracle and that she's not going to die and that she's going to live and overcome this. I mean, she's young, so.
Well, after you.
Well, I mean, it was very difficult, obviously, as it is in anticipation. And as you said, her story, I don't know if you know parts of her story, when they told her she was going to die, they said, do you have a last wish? And she said, oh yes, I want to marry my boyfriend. We thought, oh, wonderful. And she set out to do this, and the young man agreed. And they got married in the bed, and she died that night.
Oh my goodness.
So,
So you had
that was
him
her
there.
wish.
I mean, the whole,
The priest came, and he was away, but he came early, and the whole.
She was very lucid at the end. A lot of brain tumor people are
Very.
not that lucid at the end, aren't they, Gary? Is that
Very.
unusual, Gary?
It is unusual, but what a blessing
Yeah.
for this family.
No, she
Yeah.
asked
Amazing.
me about heaven. She wanted to know what was it going to be. I mean, she asked questions that, to this day, I wonder what came out of my mouth and where did it come from?
That's
Because she
amazing.
had just so much that she wanted to know.
Were you involved in the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation
No.
prior to her death?
No.
So after you
No.
found it, how did you find them? Did you go on the internet or?
Yeah, on the internet. Yeah, I think Jessica was the first contact that I had. They were looking for mentors, and I said, I think that's a good thing to do.
How long?
A couple of years, just a couple of years, yeah. Because you will never forget what that was like. Doesn't matter how many years. You will never forget the first days, months, years. You will never forget that. So you can go back there and help that person, because it's not like, oh, I'm all done with that.
Right.
You know?
You've been
Yeah.
down that road before.
Yes.
You remember what that was like, those
You
early
do.
days.
You do.
And Gary, your organization though does work with people prior to death, right? People that have brain tumors before
do.
they die.
Yeah.
So, I think
Yeah.
as you know, children's brain tumor includes children,
Yes.
actually young kids,
Yes.
but also teens and young adults. So And we work with the whole family. That means bereaved families, as well as those who are in treatment and those who are survivors. Everyone is different, but everyone wants to be a part of the community and really appreciates hearing from others, siblings and parents.
So tell me, I want to get some advice from you two, because you really, for people who are watching this, after a loss like that, after she died, what would you recommend to people when they've had a loss? And you know, how did you get it together? What did you decide? Were there things that you did that you liked that you would recommend?
I would say to what a bit of what my mom touched on earlier is just be like, don't just be. If you want to be anything, if you want to cry, cry. If you want to be happy. Like, you know, nobody will ever know what you went through ever. And to go about your next steps based upon what you think you should be doing, that's it. You just need to be yourself. Be yourself and feel what you feel. Do what you want to do. And that's how you'll put the next day in front of the next day in front of the next day.
Our social workers give the same counsel to people that I hear on the phone all the time, and that is just to normalize what you're feeling. It's normal to have those feelings after a loss. It's important, that message of legitimacy is important.
I agree, and what I'm hearing with both of you is not to judge what you're doing, because we can be critical. It's like, I'm doing it wrong, or why am I still in my robe when it's 3 o'clock, I haven't done anything today. You know, and it's like we're doing the work of grief. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I remember, I lost my whole train of thought, in that you can't, as you said, you can't judge what people do. If the first time I meet someone, I ask them, are you self-medicating? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? To just try to figure out if they're okay to start with. Because if I get a yes to any of those things, then I have to maybe think about they should see a doctor or they should do something besides talk to me, because then we're not on the same page. But most people are not. They may overeat, they may not eat, they may sleep less, but they seem to all try to be on a healthy path, whatever that means. But never to judge, because it is more stress than you already have. As you said, you didn't run because people would look at you, or it's sad.
One of the things that I have noticed about people that I've met in the grief and loss world is that they have lost some of their fear. I think you were talking about it. Do what you want to do. I mean, really, there's, you know, it's like you suddenly realize that life is short, life is yours, life is whatever. So there's something that they talk about now, and people have a little bit of difficulty with it, but when you're further down the road, like you guys are, they call it post-traumatic growth, right, Heidi?
Oh, that's a good word.
Absolutely. I mean, there's ways that we grow, even though we don't wish this on anybody. There are things that happen. We're able to handle adversity, you know, that comes our way in the future better. We appreciate relationships because we know that people can leave. I mean, they can die. So those kind of things. And then we're able to help people and go to people that have had losses. And like you said, we've been there, so we can go into those spaces. I remember when I worked with the FDNY 9/11 families, our treatment team, one of the things they were most fearful of is going into the homes. We went into the homes early of people that had lost someone in the Trade Center. I had no fear around that, because I remember what my own home was like when my brother died. So I was, you know, I said, give me the names, I'll go. That doesn't scare me. I'll just go and be with them. That's what they need right now. So yeah, so like my mom said, post-traumatic growth is a big thing, and something that I think that's not talked about enough.
Yep, absolutely. But it's down the road. I mean, you don't want to ever think that you got anything good out of this, you know, in the first couple of years, or that you're stronger, or, you know, it's hard to put your arms around that. But
and Christopher, do you think that the way that your humor, the way that you work has changed at all, or since your sister died, or no?
No, only because I was just starting out, just out of college. I hadn't yet really established any sort of career. But you know, I do every day. I still think about what I'm like as a person. What is that? as a result of what my personality traits, my work traits, my relationship traits. Where am I now based upon what I went through?
Yeah. Well, let's kind of wrap up the show with all of you. You guys are fabulous, but let's go to each one of you and give a piece of advice to somebody who's had a loss recently.
I think I've said this before. I would go to your show on television or on radio or online or podcast, because there are hours, countless hours. Am I right? How many?
Yes.
Countless hours.
14 years of radio shows.
14 years of shows. I do it. I go on. I watch, and I think it's just stunning. The benefit that comes from watching what you guys are doing. You can also come to our website, and you can see some good things as well.
Yeah. And how do we find your website?
We're at www.cbtf.org.
And as you heard, if you can volunteer there.
We are a volunteer and staff-driven organization. We'd be honored to have people volunteer. Here in New York as well as around the country.
That's great.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, Annette?
Well, I'd have to echo what Gary said. I mean, just a wealth of information. When Stephanie died, there was no internet. There was sort of nothing. You had to go find your way. So take advantage of all the wonderful people who are here and your information. And the other thing I would say is that person you lost is worth every tear that you shed. That's how I feel.
And Christopher?
I'm in agreement with that. The support system, I think, is a very important thing. It very much destroys your horizon line, so to be able to grasp onto some things that can help you, whether it's family or whether it's outside resources, is very helpful. And also, it's never the same, but it gets better.
Yeah.
And what you've been through is an incredible source of strength, even though you don't realize it right now when you're just starting out the grieving process and the recovery process. So.
Right. Well, thank you guys all. You've been fabulous, and it's been wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for everything you all are doing. And like Christopher said, it does get better, even though initially it's hard to hear that, but the pain will lessen over time.
Absolutely. We want to thank everybody for watching this show today, and we want to, Heidi and I, and I'm sure all of our guests, want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.